Hi everyone, Ainsley here from Small Fry Creations, and this week we're building a smart light box. Hey Siri, I'm creating.
Okay.
Let me show you how we did it. In 2020, like so many people around the world, our lives were impacted by the pandemic. I found myself at home a lot more, and my wife is now working from home. And being at home meant that I got to spend a lot more time in this workshop creating content for all of you at home. And it's really started to feel like my studio, and every great filming studio needs its own on-air light box. So that's what we're going to create today. I've got myself some birch plywood and some 3mm Perspex. I'm going to start by cutting everything to size, and then we can start to talk about the details and bringing this light box to life.
Firstly, let me start by saying that this project would not be possible without my small fry engineer, aka my wife. This project was definitely a team effort. We wanted the light box to sit as flush as possible to the wall, and we worked out with our light strip that we could have a box that was 50mm deep. My first step was to cut 50mm strips from the birch plywood.
I've got my plywood cut to their finished width, which is 50mm, and it's now time to get them to their length. And to bring the box together, I am going to use miter joints. So I'm going to grab one of my jigs that I built last week, and if you haven't checked out this video, I will leave a link in the description below where I build 4 table saw jigs from 1 sheet of plywood, and this one is going to be perfect for the job. So I'm going to go ahead and get those miter cuts, and then we can move on to the Perspex. I've cut one side of each of the pieces with its 45-degree miter, and this is where it becomes critical because you want your opposing sides to be exactly the same in order for your box to come together square and your joints to marry up really nicely. So what I've done on the jig is I've clamped a stop block here so I can slide my piece in here and make the cut, and then I can grab the next one and use the same block. It will become a little bit tricky when I have to get to the top and bottom because they are longer, but I will tackle that when I get to it, one problem at a time. Let's get these cut and we'll move on to the next one. I've got my sides cut, now I need to work on the top and the bottom, and I could just measure both the pieces, line the cuts up and make those cuts, but I want to try and create a method where I can create a stop block just for future knowledge and projects. So this is what I've come up with, and of course I could have used the cross-cut sled, but it's brand new and I just don't want to tilt the blade and cut through it just yet. I might in the future, but not right now. And I could also use the miter saw, but that means I have to take the dust shroud off, and it's a bit of a hassle, and I want to know how good this jig is and really what it can and can't do. So this is what I'm going with. I've got myself a sacrificial piece of plywood, which I'm going to clamp in here with the piece that I'm going to cut. And I've made myself a little stop block, which I'm going to clamp to the sacrificial piece of plywood. Yes, it does mean when I unclamp the work piece that I want to take out and put the new one in, I'm also unclamping the sacrificial piece of plywood, but I will have a cut line through, and so that means that I will be able to easily line that up. So that's the method I'm going to try, and we'll see if it works. Once I've got these cut, then we can move on to the Perspex.
The stop block system worked really well. I'm actually thinking I'm going to work out a way to bolt the plywood to the back for those times when I need it, but that's another problem for another day. Next, I could cut the groove into the plywood to accept the 3mm Perspex at the front and the back. The front piece of Perspex is set 5mm in from the front. I also used Perspex for the back piece, but this was only because I wanted it to be as thin as possible, and I had the extra Perspex on hand, and it was easier than buying 3mm MDF.
I've got all my pieces cut for the frame, and now we're up to the part where we need to work with the Perspex, and we need a way to diffuse the light. The box will have LEDs running around it, but we need a way to diffuse that light. Off camera, we have tried a couple of different effects. We have tried the frosted glass effect, and although this is okay, you can still very easily see the light behind it, so it's not diffused enough. We have also tried just regular white satin paint, and this is working a whole lot better. So this is the method we're going to work with. So I've taken off my protecting sheeting off my 3mm Perspex. Now we need to apply a couple of light, even coats of the white spray paint, and hopefully that will be enough to diffuse the light. We have finished spraying our Perspex, and I think the trick with this is light coats and more of them. So I think we ended up doing about 4 or 5 light coats going in different directions also, just to fill it in really nicely. But I think this is gonna work well. The other thing that we have done is we've used this flashing or sarking tape, which is gonna help reflect the light. So we've used that on all of the pieces, including the back panel. So that will not only help reflect the light that little bit more, but I think it's gonna help even out the light. That's the plan and the hope. So now we're up to the point where we can glue the Perspex into the box. I need to reinforce the box with some splines, and then we're up to the part where we can turn our attention to the light and actually light up the light box.
To clamp the box together, I used trusty blue painter's tape and also a band clamp. I used another jig that was my spline jig that I made from my 4 jigs from 1 sheet of plywood to cut splines into my box. The biggest tip I have for cutting splines is to know how tall the material that you're going to use as the splines before setting the table saw. You don't want to cut the spline that is taller than your spline material, otherwise this will cause you a headache when you come to glue up. How many times did I just say splines? Let's move on. The jig worked a treat and I glued in my hardwood, and I used a flush trim saw to cut the splines flush. I applied a couple of coats of poly to finish the frame, and I could turn my attention to the vinyl sign that was going on the front of the light box. To make my vinyl sign, I used my Cricut machine. I designed the sign in the Cricut design space, and then I sent it to the cutter to do its thing. The Cricut cutter is a top machine, allowing me to cut a bunch of different materials. Once cut, we could weed the sign and move it to the transfer tape to apply the sign to the light box.
The light box is at the point where we can now start to mount the lights, and we can also think about how we're going to mount it to the wall. And to do that, we are going to use a keyhole router bit. And this router bit I've never used before, but it's really handy. What it does is it creates one hole so you can put the screw in, and then when you slide the router up to create this little slot, the screw can lock in and not allow the screw to come out. And this means that we will be able to flush mount it to the wall, which is the look that we're going after. I've got it already set up. I've got it clamped here to the table saw, and I've got this block clamped into position so that I can hold the router up to it and plunge in from that spot. And I've also made sure that on my set square, I've made a mark so I know that when I do the other side, I can match that same mark, so I know that I've got my keyholes going into the right spot. After we've got this done, we can start to mount the lights, and then we can talk about how we're going to mount it to the wall and running the power through the house to turn this into a smart light.
Plunging the router in like this can be dangerous, so I would only recommend doing this method if you are comfortable using a router. The lighting we are using is a Philips Hue Smart Light Strip. The light strip connects to our Apple HomeKit and lets us set it to any colour we like. We can also set up phrases like I'm creating to turn the light to the small fry orange when I'm recording voice to camera. With the light strip installed, it was time to mount the light box, and we could wrap this project up.
And just like that, the light box is installed, and we've run the power up through into the roof and into a power point. And the whole idea behind this light box is to let everyone know in the house when I am talking to you guys at home, and it will turn red to tell everyone it's not the right time to come into the workshop. Now, I hope you have liked this video, and if you have, help me out by hitting those subscribe and like buttons, and I'll see you on the next one.